I'm Gloria Palmer, the Executive Director of Green Mountain Academy for Lifelong Learning. First of all, please silence your cell phones. Secondly, I'd like to express my thanks to the Southern Vermont Arts Center for welcoming us here, helping us with our technical needs, and co-hosting the reception after this program. Thank you as well to GNAT-TV for being here to videotape the program. Now, if you are not familiar with Green Mountain Academy, also known as GMALL, we are a small nonprofit offering adult education programs in the North Shire and beyond. Our programs cover a wide range of topics. We have lectures on national and world issues, history, humanities, the arts, and sciences. Our workshops cover all sorts of creative arts, cooking classes, discussion groups, documentary screenings, and pickleball. Tonight, however, we are launching a brand new series, Raising Resilient Children. This panel discussion is the first of what we hope to be many more programs around the important topic of youth mental health. Green Mountain Academy's role in this is foundational and logistical, and we are happy to be a part of it. But it would not have happened without the vision of a couple of moms who have done a lot of work in thinking through the issues and inviting the esteemed panel. At this time, I would like to bring to the podium the true organizers of this event, Alexis Zinberg and Sarah Garai.
Thank you, Gloria, and the board of Green Mountain Academy for Lifelong Learning, and to the Southern Vermont Arts Center for hosting us today. I'm Alexis Zinberg, and this is Sarah Garai. We are here to introduce a new initiative that is close to our heart, and I believe to all of us as families. The Raising Resilient Children Speaker Series is an endeavor designed to bring awareness, support, and access to critical resource information for our children's mental health and wellness in Southern Vermont. I want to share with you some statistics that underscore the critical need for such an initiative right now. Before the onset of COVID-19, mental health challenges were already the leading cause of disability and poor life outcomes for young people. Up to 1 in 5 children between the ages of 3 to 17 in the United States were grappling with mental, emotional, developmental, or behavioral disorders. These are our children, our friends' children, and our neighbors' children. 50% of all lifetime mental health conditions begin before the age of 14, and 75% start before the age of 24. Our children are most vulnerable during these crucial years when they are forming their identity and sense of self. Suicide is the second leading cause of death among people aged 10 to 24 in the United States. These young lives, full of potential, are being tragically cut short at an alarming rate. In Vermont, 104,000 adults have a mental health condition, and over 7,000 are in Bennington County. Our community is not immune to this crisis. It affects us all. 6,000 Vermonters aged 12 to 17 have depression. That's a significant number of our young people struggling with a debilitating condition. 41% of Vermonters aged 12 to 17 who have depression did not receive any care in the last year. That is a gap we cannot ignore. High school students with depression are more than 2 times more likely to drop out than their peers. In Bennington County, which has an average high school dropout rate of almost 20%, it's the second worst in the state. 1 in 4 people with a serious mental illness has been arrested by the police at some point in their lifetime. And a staggering 7 in 10 Vermont youth in the juvenile justice system have a mental health condition. This is a cycle we must break to provide our children with the future that they deserve. These statistics paint a somber picture of the challenges our children face every day. But we must remember that statistics are not just numbers. They represent real lives. Our children, our community. Here's the good news. We are not powerless in the face of these statistics. The Raising Resilient Children Speaker Series has been created to empower us as families and community members. It's a platform that will bring together experts, advocates, and educators to equip us with the knowledge, the skills, and the support necessary to ensure our children's mental health and wellness. We will learn about resources, strategies, and practical tools that can help us build resilient, thriving children. This series is not just about awareness, it's about action. It's about forging a path forward towards a healthier, happier future for our youth. It's about creating a community that supports its members in times of struggle and celebrates their successes. Together, we can help our children navigate the challenges that they face and ensure that they have every opportunity to reach their full potential. In the words of Margaret Mead, never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. We are so grateful that you are here and hope that you will take what you learn back to your families and friends. Let us be the driving force of positive change in the lives of our children.
Our moderator, Mary Beth O'Donnell, and our panelists, Elizabeth Scoblin, Vivica Borgia, and Melissa McManus. Mary Beth has been an active member of the educational world for the past 30 years, working with students in kindergarten through college. Most recently, she was the director of Red Cross Community School. Elizabeth currently works as a licensed mental health counselor, where she operates a private practice in Manchester, specializing in serving children and adolescents. Vivica is a certified nutritionist and works with individuals implementing her real advice using real food for real life approach. And Melissa is a strength and conditioning coach and emphasizes physical literacy and all-around improved health and wellness for all ages. We really thank you all for being here.
Well, you've all heard a little bit about us, so we just have a couple of questions before we start, before I start grilling the team here. How many people in this room are parents with kids at home right now? Okay. How many are grandparents? Okay. How many people have someone in their life that is affected by mental health issues? Okay. All right, so we're in the right place. All right, I'm going to start with you, Elizabeth. Let me grab my glasses. What are the common signs and symptoms of mental health issues in children and adolescents?
So this is not an exhaustive list, but some common symptoms of mental health illness, mental illness, are feeling sad, excessive worry, guilt, anger, extreme mood changes, highs and lows, some withdrawal from friends, changes in eating or sleeping, a slip in grades or behavioral issues at school, and hopelessness and worthlessness, signs of suicidal ideation, which means expressing the want to end your life. And I'll just stop there because I can go on.
So in my field, you can see patterns of disordered eating. Those can be a sign of a mental health issue. And an eating disorder is often seen in individuals that have a lack of control in their life. There's anger, anxiety, and loneliness. And there are some red flags for parents before you see your child losing weight or even gaining weight. And if you see your child eliminating entire food groups, for example, if all of a sudden they eliminate dairy or want to become vegetarian, that can be a sign. If they're being secretive about what they're eating, or if they're hiding food or hiding while eating, those are some other signs. And then obsessively counting calories or fat. And if you notice any of these, just talk to your child and start the dialogue.
And I'm going to go back to you for one second, because you mentioned suicide ideation, is that right? One of the questions I actually have as a parent is, you kind of think you shouldn't even say anything to somebody who you might think is that way. Do you think that parents should openly speak about that? Or do you think, you immediately hit the alarm button and run for help?
It's a good question because it feels really morbid to ask directly, but kids and adults want to be asked. Usually they show signs before you ask that would lead you to asking the question, of course, but it's not going to plant the idea in their head.
Okay, that's what I was wondering.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. How can parents distinguish between normal developmental challenges and potential mental health concerns?
So I listed a whole bunch of symptoms that probably, you know, as I'm listening to them, we all have human emotions and we all feel these things from time to time. So that's normal, that's healthy to feel a range of emotions. If it matches the experience, that's actually having some, you know, agility with your emotions. But when it becomes problematic is if the symptoms are interfering with your ability to function. If kids are all of a sudden not going to school because they have headaches or stomach aches, or they lose interest in their activities, it would be a sign that parents should check in or reach out for help.
So, are there any parents here of picky eaters? Yes, okay. So that should not be confused with a child that has an eating disorder. So picky eating is very normal in adolescence and childhood for a variety of reasons. So first, this might be the first time that your child is really exerting his or her control. And as parents know, we can't actually force our kids to eat. We learn this when our kids are toddlers and we're doing the airplane with them. They just won't eat. And that's okay, and that can be really fun and exciting. So not to worry about that. And then there's taste. You know, they're being introduced to new foods constantly, sour, sweet, bitter, salty, and they just might not feel comfortable yet. So you might have to introduce a food 15, 20 times before they even touch it. And then there's texture. You know, they're soft, mushy, crunchy, slimy, clumpy. I mean, these are all very new to your child, and you couple that with a child that is getting new teeth, losing those teeth, and then they have, you know, braces and all this other stuff in their mouth, it can just be really uncomfortable for them. So I guess my advice is relax, take a breath. They will not starve themselves, and I think that is really important for parents to know. So let your child learn how to trust their hunger and satiety cues, and don't override this by telling them, you know, just one more bite of that broccoli. Let them trust themselves. And then keep introducing these new foods, but don't force it. And then don't make meals just about the food. Serve the meal, talk about your day, not about how much or how little they're eating. Also, don't celebrate if they try the new food. Then they're going to expect this every single time, and they're going to want dad to do like some crazy dance. And this just reinforces these picky habits. Also, don't fall into like the kid food versus adult food trap. It's all just food. Just serve the meal. And even if like little Tommy is picking out the onions and Susie's picking out the carrots, it's okay. So if you're extremely concerned and you think it could be an allergy or an intolerance, then speak to your pediatrician. But otherwise, they'll grow into healthy adults.
Okay, and to follow up, are there specific foods or dietary patterns that can support or hinder a child's mental health?
So there isn't one perfect diet. I wish we had one great way of eating that works for everybody. But there are many ways to feed your family in a healthy way that works for your budget, your preferences, and your lifestyle. I would say it should include a balance of carbohydrates, fats, and proteins. We need all of these for energy, muscle growth and repair, vitamin and mineral absorption. So it's important that we get all of these. I see a lot of my clients out there, and you know that I love to focus on protein, and this is true for children too, because it's the most challenging for us to get. I think we all get enough carbs, right? Our kids do too, and they get the fat. So maybe focusing on the protein can really help them. So like my overarching general guidelines, I would say consume a variety of fruits and vegetables, put protein on every plate, including their snacks, and then limit the amount of processed foods and sugar. So I'll talk a little bit about processed foods and sugar, and they get a pretty bad reputation. We just have to keep them in moderation. So when we consume a diet that's really high in like chips, cereals, crackers, cookies, candies, and low in vegetables and protein, we kind of feel like garbage, and so do our children. You know, they have low energy, trouble concentrating, irritability, they're moody, and that's due to these like highs and lows of these insulin spikes and crashes. So we want to avoid this, and we want to help our children avoid this. So we want to limit the consumption of added sugar, which is different from natural sugar that you find in fruit and blueberries. Those are 100% okay. So children ages 7 to 10, they really shouldn't have more than like 6 teaspoons of sugar a day, and a can of soda has 10 teaspoons, so obviously a little older, or a little bit more. And we also want to be mindful of hidden sugars in foods, and you'll see these in cereals and salad dressings and granola bars. So just for reference, like a Nature Valley granola bar has about 3 teaspoons of sugar, 2 tablespoons of barbecue sauce also has 3 teaspoons of sugar, and a cup of Raisin Bran has like 4.5 teaspoons of sugar. So you're really getting up there close, and they probably don't even realize that they're having a dessert. So check the labels. Unless it's a dessert, sugar shouldn't be one of the first 3 ingredients. And then you want to limit these processed foods. You know, if you don't recognize the ingredients on the label, you probably shouldn't feed it to your child. And if your grandmother wouldn't recognize it, it's also best to avoid it. And then my last thing here, and I know I'm getting very long-winded, but for parents of athletes, I did feel responsible to just touch on this and bring some attention to REDS, which is Relative Energy Deficiency in Sport. Basically, when a young athlete isn't eating enough food to support their training. And you'll see fatigue, weight loss, dehydration in females. They might have an irregular or absent period, GI distress, frequent muscle or tendon injuries, and stress fractures. And just so you know, this does affect males as well. So if you see this, you know, speak to your pediatrician, but I also want to assure you all that it is 100% reversible. So you don't have to totally panic.
Well, and that brings up an interesting question about practice after school for sports, especially with older students who may not necessarily be packing food to bring to school, right? You know, what is your guideline as far as, you know, how far apart they should be eating a meal and then actually working out?
They should definitely be eating before their workouts. If they're eating at noon at lunch, they should have snacks in multiple bags, okay? Because they're going to forget one bag. It should be in different pockets of all different bags. And if then they're going to go study with friends and they're not coming home till 7, they need something else to eat. These children, they need to fuel their bodies. They're super busy at school and then they're running around all day. So make sure that they have adequate fuel with them.
Move on to Melissa. What type of physical activities are most beneficial for improving mental health in children and adolescents?
I would say the first thing I want to do really quick is just define maybe what we're talking about. So when I think of physical activity, it's really any skeletal muscle movement. So tucking your hair behind your ear, crossing your leg, physical activity. And I think for the purpose of today's conversation, that's not necessarily what we're talking about, right? Exercise, on the other hand, is very deliberate, planned, repetitive movement for the sake of improving fitness. That's not necessarily what we're talking about either today, given the topic, right? So what I want to talk about is just movement. Movement, repetitive, organized, for some purpose, right? So that can be dancing, it can be playing a sport, it can be going for a walk, it can literally be anything. So that's my answer. I have a really complicated answer, and any movement, that's my answer. It's a frustrating answer, right? If you're expecting something very specific, but even if it's frustrating, it should remove any stress or any pressure around making sure you're picking the right thing, right? So I would say, really any. It's a really potent intervention, movement is. And it's a therapy that is accepted, I think, wildly as effective, but not employed yet. And I call it a therapy because I really do think that movement is very therapeutic. And if we can find ways to employ it as a therapy, we're really gonna help move the needle for a lot of our kids.
So I have a feeling that you would want longer recess periods?
I just want the kids moving, right? So, and at school, I think they're moving a lot. Finding ways for them to move in a structured, planned way is great. Also, finding ways for them to move in spontaneous, unplanned, unique ways is also great. You know, just making sure that it's more wildly adopted as a first choice or second choice or even third choice intervention is really kind of the only goal here. Instead of just always going towards psychotherapy, which is great, medication, which is great, we have decades of science that show that movement is so beneficial, and in some studies even shows that it's as beneficial as medications in some instance. So that just blows my mind that we, you know, all the people in here that said they know someone that experiences issues with mental health, how many already use movement as a therapy in your toolbox? How many of you already use movement for yourself or your children, right? So a lot less hands, and I'm not going to make you raise your hands, but probably less hands than would raise if I said medication or psychotherapy or any other intervention. So my goal would be to see more hands raised when we say how many of you have used movement as therapy. But yeah.
And do you have any advice to parents on how they can encourage their children to engage in regular physical activity?
I love this one because if you know me, you know how much I love when parents show up with their kids to one of our places. It is one of my favorite things to see. So I would say, you know, the first thing you can do is let them see you use movement in your life. Let them see you move your body with your friends, by yourself, and then participate with them. Do it with them. How fun is that for them? What great memories for them to have to be able to do that. And then also, you know, introduce them to a variety of options, right? So if you try something and it didn't work, it would be like introducing solid foods to your kids. You tried broccoli, they didn't like broccoli. That didn't mean that you never tried another vegetable for them again. My kid doesn't like vegetables because I gave him broccoli once and they didn't like it. Try a bunch of different things in a bunch of different combinations at a bunch of different times. And keep in mind that just because you didn't like it doesn't mean that your kid's not going to like it. My daughter, I think, intentionally plays every sport or does every movement that I never did and know nothing about, and that's fine. And I wonder sometimes if she hadn't been introduced to that, what she would really be missing, all of the great stuff she'd be missing from that thing that she found. So introduce them to a variety of things, even if you know nothing about those things, if they're your favorite things or not, whether their friends are doing it or not, and just keep trying different things.
Can anybody here share an example of how an integrated approach involving therapy, fitness, and nutrition has been effective in supporting youth mental health?
Yeah, but can I also circle back to just how parents can also encourage their kids?
I felt like that the reason why I did that was because I thought you answered it at the beginning.
So I did just want to touch on how parents can kind of promote a healthy relationship between their children and food, because I think this is so critical. So I really think it's important that you cook with your children. We need to eat for our entire lives, so really teach your children how to cook and include them in the process of meal planning and prep, and they'll be more inclined to eat what you prepare. And then eat and act in a way that you want your children to eat and act when they're adults, and model this behavior. So if you can imagine it's dinner time and you have a parent and a child, okay? You have parent A, and they're sitting down for the meal and they say, I had a really long day, so I just want to have some of this, but I really shouldn't. It's going to make me fat. I should just eat a little of this so I can fit into my jeans tomorrow. And then you have parent B, and they say, I had a really long day, so it feels good to enjoy this meal with you and to refuel my body so I'm re-energized for tomorrow. So these are two very different messages that a child will take away, and this is coming directly from you. And in example 1, food is the enemy. It's what makes us fat. In example 2, food is what we enjoy with our family, and it nourishes our body and our mind. So if you really think about it, food is the longest relationship that we'll have in our lives. It's longer than the one you have with your parents, your spouse, your children. So you really want to make this a positive one for your child.
I'll repeat the question just because I think
Oh,
I'll
yes.
set up. Yep. Can you share examples of how an integrated approach involving therapy, fitness, and nutrition has been effective in supporting youth mental health?
So yes. Show of hands if you've ever had a brain-gut connection. For example, like butterflies in your stomach, maybe us feeling like a little nauseous over there before we get on stage. I think we've all been there, right? Well, there's exciting new research showing that there's also a gut-brain connection. So your gut hosts what's called a microbiome. It's basically an ecosystem of good and bad bacteria. And this microbiome has many duties, but most interesting to me is that it makes neurotransmitters, which basically help regulate everything from movement to motivation to emotions. And this is really exciting because by improving our gut health, we can possibly boost our mental health. And to do that, and I'll keep this pretty simple, but by increasing probiotics, which we find all around the world that they've been consuming. In Greece they have yogurt, in Germany they have sauerkraut. So by introducing those to your child, and then if you feed those with some prebiotics like garlic and onions and cabbage, you can possibly help them boost their mental health. So I find that that's really exciting.
How would you define resilience, Elizabeth?
So I think resilience is the ability to adapt to difficult situations. We hear this word a lot. It's the whole purpose of why we're here tonight. But teaching kids to be flexible, that it's okay to have difficult emotions, and it builds character and strength to push through those emotions.
And how can we help kids build resilience?
So resilience is interesting because it's individual. You think of it as getting up when you get knocked down and retaking a test if you have a chance to get a better grade. But I also think of it in a collective way, and that relationships are really key to building resilience because we need a support system to lean on. I think COVID really showed everyone that that period of isolation was a challenge. So I think of it like some of the more nuanced situations with kids. If you fail a test and you retake it, I just gave that example, but if you don't make a team and your friend makes a team, showing up for your friend in happy times too. It's a hard lesson to teach a kid to be happy for other people when you didn't get what you necessarily wanted, but those sort of relationships, building them in good times and in bad, allow us to have a community of support.
And how does discomfort demonstrate growth in your fields?
This is an easier one.
I know, I was like waiting for you. I'm like, I have discomfort growing all the time with you, Melissa. Thank you.
Probably 80% of you. But I want to go back to the question before, just really quick. The question before was
Integrated?
integrated. So in my field, especially in movement, it's people see the benefits of movement, and it's more of like a side effect. They hadn't intended it, right? They start working out, they start feeling better, they start eating better, they start sleeping better, their relationships get better. So it's more of something that kind of happens accidentally. It's a welcome side effect, an unintended consequence of movement. So when you start to see one area get better, you start to see it improve in other areas. So it kind of becomes integrated in that way without really intending to be. So if you don't know where to start, sometimes just picking the one that you can get your kid on board with first can sometimes help loop the other areas in. But discomfort, and we're laughing because physical discomfort is obviously, can sometimes be a sign of growth. But discomfort, picking a movement therapy that also might be helping some of their other concerns. If you have an isolated child or someone you fear is isolated, getting them involved in something that might put them in touch with their peers more often, that's going to be uncomfortable, but allowing them to do that, you're going to get some growth through that discomfort. So it can be physical discomfort, it can be emotional, social emotional discomfort, it could be a whole slew of kinds of discomfort. And it's okay for them to say, like, I don't really want to do this today. Okay, I hear you. Let's find something different we can do tomorrow, and we can talk about that. But just allowing them to be uncomfortable and do it anyways, and that's where the modeling comes in, you know? I don't always want to get up and do something, but you do it anyways and you feel better after, and just let yourself feel uncomfortable and acknowledge to them, yeah, it is uncomfortable.
Yeah, I was going to say the modeling, I feel like that's sort of a thread and a takeaway that you'll see, but I think in adult life and just everyday life, when we have minor setbacks and we kind of model accountability for kids, mistakes we've made, and even walk them through a situation, talking about our emotions out loud, helps give them a roadmap of what to do the next time they fall down or they fail or they have a situation where they're uncomfortable. They kind of remember seeing us do it, and it teaches them it's okay to admit that we're wrong. My kids love asking me about mistakes I've made and trouble I got in because they love it. They want to know about sort of how to handle it when it comes up for them.
How can parents create an open and supportive environment for their children to discuss their mental health concerns?
That's a good question, Rena. The biggest thing I would say, listen. We're so quick to want to fix everything. We hear something and we have all these ideas in our head of rushing in and having problem-solving ideas, and sometimes they don't actually care what we have to say. They just want to dump it and move on. And so I think giving them the space to hear, to be heard, and to be validated. And also, I would say be curious about their world, because a lot of what they're experiencing, and the kids I see in therapy, I ask them a lot of questions about, tell me more about what that means. Like, you're on Snapchat. Tell me, like, what exactly the purpose was and what you were thinking in that moment, because I didn't grow up with that. So it's okay to be curious and try to connect with them in that way. And they then realize that you've kind of entered their world a little and you care. Two other things I would say too is, I think it's important to give kids little nuggets here and there, like teachable moments, and bringing up topics when you can, instead of sitting them down with like big ideas and a big agenda, because they really hear what we say. And I think when you give them the smaller bites to digest, they're not so overwhelmed and they're not so on their heels, and allowing them to set the agenda. They don't want to talk to us when we pick them up.
No.
How's your day?
Mm-hmm.
I get nothing. I get nothing until lights are out. And Alexis, you mentioned this, and I totally agree with you. My daughter she doesn't say much to me until I want to go to bed, until I'm dawning after we read, and she wants to tell me start to finish her whole day. So we have to open that floor to them when they're setting the agenda.
I also highly suggest conversations in the car.
Yeah. Or what a great opportunity to kill two birds with one stone and go for a walk, right? I'm going to get much more out of a teenage girl asking her a question on a walk than like this. You know, they go for a walk, where you can't see their face and they can't, get creative in the space that you give them to communicate in, instead of just the opportunity, but how not threatening can you make that environment feel?
Okay, this is a big one. When should parents consider seeking professional help for their child's mental health? And help maybe talk about a little bit the right way to find a therapist or mental health support.
Yeah, so we know our kids best. We can tell often when there are things going on, just the symptoms I mentioned at the beginning, changes in behavior, maybe their peers are changing, they're spending more time in their room, although that's typical too, so don't hang on that. But I feel like we kind of have gut feelings, right? We know when things are off. So I would say it's really critical to build connection with kids' schools. They're always the first line of defense. These lovely, God bless them, people spend hours and hours and hours a week. And they know our kids. So coaches, teachers, administrators, school counselors, honestly, even like just people that caring adults, right? We have kids that go to friends' houses every day after school, or family members. So it's just important to start with the people that spend time with your kids. School counselors, all of the schools have them, I think, right? All of the schools now have them, most of them? Most of them, maybe not all. That's a great place to start. They are available to check in with your kids, to do different relational work with their peers, to do social emotional programming, but they know our kids too. And when kids, I was a school counselor before I opened a private practice, and you know, your doors open and kids just pop in when they're having a hard moment. So they're a good place to start. They all have resources in the community, lists of therapists, and it's hard around here. It's not super easy to find people. There are therapists, lovely therapists that I've met since just moving here not too long ago, and a lot of people are, you know, have waiting lists, but I would say all of the schools have that information. And in choosing a correct therapist, it's all about the fit. You know, when a kid goes to see a therapist, and it should be about your child feeling comfortable with that person. It takes a little while. I always say to kids that come to me, it's awkward to see someone for the first time and then talk about difficult things. So it takes a little bit of time, but different styles, there's different therapies for different presenting issues. So.
And maybe you talk a little bit about, I mean, after COVID,
Yeah.
Zoom introduced us to telehealth. At least that's what I felt like.
Yes, so, telehealth, which most of us probably have used in some form or fashion, that was a real silver lining that came out of COVID, because we can see people, just wider ranges of people. I wouldn't recommend telehealth, so it's basically conducting a therapy session online. I wouldn't recommend it, doesn't work super well for little kids, but teenagers and up. I've got a few college kids that are in different parts of the state that I see weekly on Zoom or on something in some form of HIPAA Zoom, but it's great, and I would encourage you. Teenagers love screens, so they will be comfortable with that if you can't find anyone locally.
All right, so now it's the quick, if everybody's walking out the door tonight and you had one thing that you talked about that you would like them to walk away with, maybe you can give us one.
I would say prioritizing communication and connection. Parents especially, because parenting is hard and you shouldn't worry alone.
Model the behavior you want to see in your child. They're constantly watching you.
I can't just do one. I would say,
Okay.
you know, model, it makes that same thing that we're all saying, right? Let them see you do the thing that you're asking them to do, but do it with them. I mean, we can't necessarily do therapy with them. We can't always eat every meal with them, but do as much of it with them as you can. And just try a bunch of different options and combination of options. You know, that what they like one minute might be what they, you know, hate the next minute, but just keep trying different things. Try anything and everything.
Okay. And I think we have some other questions that we're now going to ask you guys. Thanks. Oh, and I actually have a question. I know I'm not in the audience, but I want to ask a question. One thing that we haven't talked about, but of course it's the elephant in the room for all of our children, is technology and social media and what that has done with mental health. And so we believe at Raising Resilient Children that this needs to be its very own topic for a conversation that we hope to have in the future. But I was just wondering if you have some just general guidelines as far as how long or how much or what age or anything.
Yes, so so it is, yes, it's going to be a whole separate topic because there's just so much to cover, but I would say with screens in general, I printed out something with, it's basically a lot less than we all do, right? Up until the age of 2, they're not supposed to really be on screens at all. I think in high school, it's something like less than 2 hours outside of work on it. 5 to 18, it should 4 to 6 hours a day, but it depends. I'm reading this wrong. But basically, it's a lot less. They're recommending less than we do. And I would say the takeaways I have from my work are it's important to have tech-free zones and times. So mealtime shouldn't have technology. Bedrooms shouldn't have technology. Kids are not sleeping enough. They are on their, if you have your phone in your bedroom as a 16-year-old, you are going to be on it until 2 a.m. So I would recommend charging stations in the kitchen where adults put their phones to. Get an old school alarm clock if you need one, but I think having it out of your bedroom is key.
Mm-hmm.
And then the last thing I'll say is delay the use of it if you can. So partnering with other families and parents and talking about, kids love to pin us against with so-and-so's mom. Let them have a phone at this age. And if you partner as parents, like nobody has a phone. So you guys can all go read it. No. You need your phone.
Love it. Okay. Let's see what the audience, well, this comes up with social media. How many of the challenges we're discussing do we think pre-existed social media? That's interesting.
I think the presentation probably changed, but they always existed, right?
Mhm. And then kind of the follow-up to that is how much of this is related to kids' pressure to form a digital social identity?
That's a good one.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's important, back to the modeling, to talk to kids about what they're seeing, whether it's being curious again about what they're seeing on social media and breaking down the comparison culture of how most of it's not real because their brains aren't fully developed to understand that yet. So we think about when we were young, coming home and having comparisons we made at school, but they have constant access to it.
Yeah.
So I think we used to have a break from it, and now it's just kind of everywhere.
I agree.
All right, sleep. How do you get teenagers to prioritize sleep?
Well, I'll just touch on sleep because I think it's just a pillar of health. If you're not sleeping well, you will not eat well. If you don't eat well, you won't want to exercise. So it is so incredibly important. And I would say the majority of kids, particularly teenagers, they still need like 10 hours of sleep. And adolescents, they probably need closer to 12. So if you just do the math on that, these kids should be going to bed at like 8, okay? They're not. So yes, I think it's so vitally important. That's when their brains are storing all the information. That's when their bodies are regenerating. I mean, it is maybe even like the most important thing. I would even say it's more important than what they're eating.
I guess what makes them sleep more. Moving more. And I realized I didn't answer probably the most important question, so I'm just going to go back and answer it. We never talked about probably movement and how often and when and all of that stuff. I totally skipped over that. So of all of the decades of research, and if you want to read the data on this, there was a study in 2022 called Move Your Mental Health. So if you like data, go and read that study. It's so good. But it says of all of the decades of research they looked at, it was moderate to vigorous exercise was best. But those are relative terms. Keep that in mind. It means something different for everyone. 3 to 4 times a week. And also that it include a combination of aerobic and resistance training activities. So I forgot to mention that part. That's important. Okay.
Okay. My child does not play sports, so physical activity is not naturally part of, I guess, the day. So how do I help my teen build healthy habits around physical activity without creating a negative dynamic between us,
Yeah.
no nagging, and without creating body image issues or feeding that narrative?
I think one of the reasons I wanted to define the difference between exercise and movement is for that reason. There are so many ways to move your body that aren't team sports. So many different ways. I always played team sports, and my daughter doesn't play a single team sport. She ended up, riding because that's what Amanda Bear got her into or something. She just does different things. But just keep exploring different things and making sure that, just like at the dinner table, you know, where you're not battling food, you don't exercise to lose weight, right? It doesn't have to become that negative body image thing. Why do we move our bodies? We move our bodies because it makes us feel better. It keeps our heart healthy. It keeps our body healthy. It keeps us here longer. So understanding that you don't exercise to lose weight or exercising because you have a body image issue or something like that. But just find different ways to do it. Don't give up or don't stop just at team sports. It could be dancing. It could be, you know, if you were here on Saturday night, how many of you were on Saturday night? There was an amazing story, and I think Chris is here somewhere. Maybe you can fix it wherever you are if I butcher it. But there was one great story about a young man who found fly fishing. And it was not even remotely something that he ever saw anyone that looked like him doing. It was nothing that anyone in his family did. And he found it, and it became such an important part of his life. And it just became, you know, this great thing for him. And I thought that was so powerful. Here's something that you wouldn't necessarily see as sport or movement, but it had that, it was filling that role. It was doing that thing, which I thought was so cool. So get creative. Fly fishing. We have everything. We are so lucky in this area to have so many choices. Try not to stick with the
have a fly fishing team now.
Yeah, we have.
Yeah.
There's so many choices. So just be creative.
Okay, this one is a big one. Given the instability in the world and the fact that Vermont is sometimes a bubble, how do we explain or help our kids expand their experience beyond the local?
That's a really good question.
You read it again, Mary Beth?
Basically saying, you know, how do we, given the instability of the world and the fact that Vermont is sometimes a bubble, how do we explain or help our kids expand their experience beyond here? Certainly very relevant right now.
It's very relevant. I mean, we don't all have means to travel, but we're not too far from certain cities and different places with a bit more cultural opportunities. I think it's important to talk to kids about differences. And even if we don't see them or come in contact with them every day at school, it's important to value difference. And I think empathy across the board, if you teach kids that everyone has feelings and you teach them what it means to be in someone else's shoes, I would say we can start to begin to understand. But that's a really good question. I'm not sure I have a good answer for it.
I think it's why most of us moved here, is because it feels maybe like such a magical place. And the flip side of that, I know personally when we decided to move here, my concern was, but this isn't what the world looks like. This isn't real. This isn't. And so we had thought we would travel more, and when COVID hit, we weren't able to do that. So how else do you explain to your kids that this isn't what the entire world looks like? We just say that. We just talk about that. You know, this is a very unique place we live in, and just saying that and owning it, and then finding ways to explore it that don't involve travel.
Or maybe even inviting people in your home that are different, that have different religions or backgrounds. I know that there are foreign exchange programs, so invite these people that do come here to visit into your home or just for conversations, and then they can teach you or teach your children.
And I think building empathy is so important, and you can do that here, right? Our kids can get involved in various community service activities, and I think that that's really important for their growth and development. Okay, what kind of support is there in our community to support parents? Or how can we create that? This is a great question.
I think we need to create more. I'm not really sure, to be honest. You talked about support groups at the schools you were coming from.
Parent groups.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I don't know, the place that we moved up from in New York, you know, each school developed parent support groups. And it was really nice. I mean, I feel very fortunate in my friends here that I kind of have multi-age groups. You know, I've got friends who have got kids that are further down the road from my kids. I have them right with me, and I have younger. And I think those conversations are so beneficial. And you need support, right? This is a team activity. This is not an individual sport. So I don't know if schools would consider doing that, but I think it's a great thing to promote, and an easy thing, an easy actionable item.
Yeah, because honestly, when we were meeting a couple weeks ago, we realized, some of these questions, it led us to have to recommend, experts in this town, and we realized we don't really have a list of them. And that's a problem. So I think maybe we're also looking to you to say, what do you need? And can we, from a grassroots perspective, maybe start some groups to help some families and, help each other out, because we don't have all the answers and we don't have all the resources.
And sometimes maybe people don't start those groups because they think I'm not qualified or I'm not. But sometimes you just need that group to walk with or hike with or move your body with that just have been there before. You're right. It just doesn't. You don't have to be an expert in your field. You're an expert in raising your kid, and that's the advice that people want to hear. I say all the time, like to friends with older kids, could you just write the book so that I can read it, and then I'll make notes and I'll pass it on to the next person. Just to share your experiences and say, oh yeah, I've been there, and just to have that person that's been through it already. So getting together with your group, and maybe not just your really tight-knit social group, inviting that other mom from or dad from your classroom, or that one that doesn't normally go on your social gatherings with, just including more people, be more inclusive.
I think that's the end of those questions.
Thank you again, Mary Beth, Elizabeth, Viveka, and Melissa for your insights today and for kicking off the Raising Resilient Children Speaker Series. As we mentioned, this series is not just about awareness, it's about action. And so I think from tonight's discussion, we learned, what I heard was modeling the behavior that you want to see in your kids. And this is true for all areas in your life. Prioritize connection and communication. Participate in activities with your kids. Regularly explore new options and combinations of options. And that goes for nutrition and movement and therapeutic approaches. And finally, parents, you're not alone in your struggles. So don't worry alone. And it's okay to ask for help. And I think that last question regarding community support, I would encourage all of you, if that's something that you're interested in doing, please talk to your PAs or to your schools directly. And if you're not getting anywhere, you can come to us. This started as a grassroots campaign. And so, and I'm so happy to see so many people here. So it can be done.
Before we go, please mark your calendar for January 30th, and that will be the next Raising Resilient Children event. It also coincides with Vermont's Mental Health Awareness Day, and there'll be more additional details as we get forward. And finally, all are welcome to join us in the back for some sweet treats and beverages, non-alcoholic but bubbly, courtesy of Green Mountain Academy for Lifelong Learning. And again, we just want to thank this extraordinary group on stage, and thanks to all of you for being here. Be well. Woo!